Hey there! Today we're going to learn about vectors. What vectors are, how to use them, and how they apply to game development. We're going to start teaching vectors with a chessboard. So let's jump into it. On Wikipedia, the long, drawn-out description of vectors is:
in mathematics and physics, a vector is an element of a vector space. For many specific vector spaces, the vector has received specific names which are listed below. Historically, vectors were introduced in geometry and physics, typically in mechanics, before the formalization of the concept of vector space. Therefore, one talks often of vectors without specifying the vector space to which they belong. Specifically, in the Illusion space, one considers spatial vectors, also called illusion vectors, which are used to represent quantities that have both magnitude and direction, and may be added and scaled, that is multiplied by a real number, for forming a vector space.
Did you get that? Of course you didn't. How can anybody get that? What a vector actually is just a way of representing an object's position or direction. To further explain vectors, let's go back to the chessboard. On the chessboard we can see loads of white and black squares. At the side of the board you can see numbers and letters. Let's call this our Y and our X axis. To describe where we are on the board, we'll use a number from the Y axis and a letter from the X axis. So from here, X marks the spot. On the X axis, we'll take the letter E, and the Y axis, we'll take the number 4, meaning our position using these vectors is 4E. That's an example of how to describe a position in a 2D area. But how does this affect Roblox? Well, as we know, Roblox is a 3D game for the most part, and every part in that game has a position. So let's go back to Roblox Studio and make a part. So we're now in Roblox Studio again. We just have a base plate in our scene. If we look from the top, you see a lot of squares. Does this look familiar at all? To me, it resembles a chessboard. Each stud here on the Lego piece of our base plate represents a square in the chessboard. So say for example, if we were to find 4E, there it is. However, on Roblox we don't use numbers and letters. Everything is measured in studs. And a stud is just one of these little blocks. If you have any Lego at home, you'll look at the top of it and there'll be studs on top. That's what we're working with here. So say, let's create a part. Right away, we have a part in our game. And we scroll down on the properties window to the size, we can see 3 vectors. We'll see a 4, a 1 and a 2. So that means it's 4 studs across, it's 1 stud tall, and it's 2 studs wide. So if we go ahead and use the scale tool on this and scale it down to 1 and a 1, we get a single stud size of a block. So for today, the practical example we're going to be using vectors in is in the creation of a part in our game. So first of all, when you want to create a part in Roblox, you will create a variable for your part. In this case, I'm just going to call it part. You will equals it to an instance.new, and then in the brackets of that, we'll say part. And what that does is it just tells the Roblox game engine to make a part for us. We can use instance.new on practically any object part of the engine. So say if you want to create a light, create a script, etc., create a camera, create terrain, anything, that can do that for us. So our part, next of all, we're going to want to make the part's parent the workspace. So we want to put this part in our game essentially. The part.parent equals game.workspace. And as we know from a previous video, workspace, it just holds all the physical objects in our game scene. So next we want to set the size of the part, so we'll say part.size equals vector3.new. And what vector3 really allows us to do is to store 3 vectors. So for this case, it's going to be a vector for the height, a vector for the width, and a vector for the depth of the cube. So if we go ahead, put 2, 2, and 2. That's going to describe that exactly to Roblox for us. And then we want to go ahead and also use vectors. Let me just fix my code here. So part dot position equals vector tree dot new 0 0 0. Actually, let's set the up and down axis, the height axis, to 2, just to kind of encompass its height here. So reviewing our code here, this should work. But before I run the game, what I want to do is I want to name it. So part dot name equals, I'm going to call it Kieran's part. So now if we run this in our game, we have our part here. This is created by the script, and in the workspace we can see the name is Kieran's part. And just to verify or show you guys that it is actually from the script, you can see position is 0, 1 and 0, and size is 2, 2 and 2. And to kind of show you guys how the vector tree manipulates an object, I'm going to open the scale tool. I'm going to drag on one of the axes, and you can see there the size down the bottom right hand side of the screen does change value. So I bring this out to 4. You'll see that I think it's the width is 4. If you want to change the depth to 4 or 5, you can just drag it out like that, and we can see the value changes there also. And finally, for the height, we can change this out. We'll pull it out and have it whatever value we want. That is essentially a vector. So now that we used vector tree at a very basic level, I want to make it a bit more complicated now and create a second part. So if we look at our chessboard, our initial part at the very bottom left will be 0 0. Let's create the Roblox equivalent to our X position. So we can see it's 4 studs across and 4 studs above. So let's go back to our script and start by creating a second variable for our second part. So let's call this local second part equals instance dot new and we will give it the value of part. Let's remove that there. Always remember, if you put a value inside brackets like this in Lua, it's called a parameter. We'll be touching more on that on the functions video later on. So with our second part, let's go ahead and set its parent to the workspace. Let's set its size to the same as the first part. So it's going to be 2 by 2 by 2. So part dot size equals vector tree dot new 2 by 2 by 2. When we set the position this time, it's going to get a bit more interesting. So part dot position. Ooh, I made a mistake there. So we want to make sure to set the second part instead of the part. We want to write to the different variables. So second part dot position equals, we're going to take the position of the first part, paste it in there, and we're going to add another vector tree onto it. So let's add vector tree dot new 4 0 4. And essentially what this is telling Roblox to do is to add 4 blocks or studs on the width axis and 4 studs on the depth axis. And what it's doing is just adding these values onto this one. So when this runs, what's really gonna happen is there will be a value of a 4, 2 and 4. All we have to do is add our vectors on top of each other. So now if we review our code and finish our code, let's go ahead and run and see how our script runs. So now if we look down into our game, you can see that we now have 2 blocks. We've one at the 0, 0 position, and we have one at the 4 and 4 position. If we want to change these down to a single stud size, let's go back to our script and change the size in both of them to 1, 1, 1. And likewise with the second block. Let's try it again, and we should have 2 smaller blocks now. Brilliant! In the previous video, we touched on variables. And one thing I want to show you guys in this video is how to use variables with a vector tree. It's really simple. So all we really have to do is write a normal variable like we did in one of the previous videos. Name it. Let's say pos for position, and equals that to vector tree 0 to 0. And on this line here where we set the position of our part, let's just set the position of that to pos. So what the script is doing here is just taking the value from our variable and setting it to the position. And likewise on our second object, instead of rewriting the same vector tree again, what we can simply do is delete that and put in pos. So this vector will be adding on top of the value of that variable. So thanks guys for watching this video. I just noticed a mistake there with my pos variable. Instead of just vector tree and the parameters, this should be vector tree.new. You always want to put .new when you're creating a new vector tree. So my challenge for you with this is I want your code to generate a chessboard. One way I want to help you in this challenge is by showing you how to make the square or the block white or black. So let's say we want our part to be a white square. We say part.brickColor equals brickColor.new, and we'll give it a value of white. And likewise with our second part dot brickColor equals brickColor.new bracket black. And just to show you guys, if we want these parts to be beside each other, let's change this from 4 spaces away to 1 space away on both axes. So if we run this now in our game, we should see 2 bricks beside each other, 1 white, 1 black. So how can you replicate a chess game using this code? Thanks all for watching this video. I hope you learned a thing or two. If you have any ideas how I can improve my videos to help you more, just let me know in the comment section. If you like my videos, please give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. And that's all for now, so I'll catch you next time, and happy coding.